Hi, I'm Brian Moran, founder of Government CIO. Welcome to Government CIO Magazine.
Hello and welcome to Government CIO Magazine. Today we're sitting down with the Chief Technology Officer at the Department of Labor, Hamid Ouyachi.
Well, just a bit of, little bit of a historical historical detail rather. Winston Royce, whose name is associated with waterfall, in 1970, when he drew the waterfall cascade and workflow without the feedback loop, there were no iterations built into it. He drew it as an example of what not to do, not as an example of what to do. And actually, the waterfall model that he was advocating for was a waterfall model that had iterations built into it, so that you had feedback loop going from each phase back to the previous phase. But unfortunately, the implementation that took the federal government is the cascading model without iterations built into it. So if one uses that model, I would say that inevitably you're going to end up with phases being disconnected from each other. You can spend months, you can have a team that spends months developing requirements, completely isolated from the team that is later on going to develop the design. So if you take that and layer it on top of the organization, and then you say, where does accountability reside? Well, I can easily, as a design person, blame people who, well, I got crappy requirements, use the word. And then you could do the same thing at the implementation level. We didn't get a good design. So there is no group accountability. What you end up with is diffuse accountability, and at the same time, user requirements are not really accounted for because the user does not come into play until the end. And by that time, are you going to make a decision to go back all the way to the requirements phase again and come down the waterfall? So the bottom line as far as waterfall is concerned is that the user is absent. And we are building software for users. Well, you can do that also, just to link up to the previous question, you can do that also within the waterfall model. Nothing stops one from introducing iteration in the waterfall and introducing, for instance, incremental as well as modular approach. Agile, as far as I'm concerned, is not, by the way, is not one process. It is not a process, it is a philosophy. It is a set of principles that can be applied in various ways. Now, is it possible to develop, following the Agile methodology and develop a product that does not meet end user needs? Absolutely. So in other words, one shouldn't be focused too much on which methodology, but actually try to change the paradigm and say, do we have organizations that can support Agile? Do we have organizations that can truly build, that can truly respond to the needs, either the changes that come because of regulations or the needs of the user? I think the federal government is struggling with that concept because the idea, for instance, of transparency and open government brought that to the fore. Great demand coming in from the public for government data. Government response has been very slow. Why? Because we cannot retool and quickly respond. So going back to the first question about waterfall, I think what is interesting is the process a reflection of the organization? And what does the process say about the organization? The waterfall process has built into it an idea of the organization as a machine, where parts of the machine are well defined, and each has a specific role. So it's a bit of the Newtonian world, where you have laws of causality and laws of linearity, where one thing goes from the next to the next to the next. So when you view the organization as a machine, then it is not adaptable. And if we all can get the specification, well, we could never get the specifications right. There is no way for us to know everything that there is to know. So that's the inherent failure, as far as I'm concerned, that is inherent to the waterfall. Now, when you come to Agile, Agile then requires a different view of the organization. We have to move away from the mechanical and mechanistic view of the organization and say, is the organization an adaptive system? You know, from a mechanical metaphor to more of a biological metaphor, and use, for instance, something like ecosystem, where you have, highly adaptive, highly interconnected, highly, learns, and then responds, does not react. That's very important. It responds to the pressures of the environment rather than react to the pressures of the environment. Because reaction, again, is topical, doesn't have any strategic long-term benefit. The response, however, is much more of a organized response that has a strategic benefit. So if we change our view of the organization, agility will come with that. Otherwise, you can do you can do what they call fake agile. In a sense, it looks like, yeah, you adopted you're doing daily scrum, you have a backlog, you have a whole, you can throw it off, but it still doesn't really deliver. Well, that's an interesting question, but I think an element of an answer would be precisely the view of the organization as a bureaucracy. The government is comfortable with the view of the organization as a machine, where each, and also process-driven, linear, and process and sequential. So if I do my part, and then I hand it over, then the next person takes over and does their part and hand it over. It allows for this sort of what I call false view of individual competence, that if me as a cog in the machine, I can do my part, then the next part is taken care of. But unfortunately, that's not how organizations work. That's why we have a hard time also with collaboration and sharing and matrix organizations, truly strong matrix organizations, because that horizontal view within a vertical organization is very difficult. So I would suggest that, again, it has to do with the nature of the way the government organizes. You need self-organizing, self-empowered, highly learning teams to be able to truly achieve Agile and deliver on the value of Agile. It doesn't matter which implementation you take. Daily scrums or any of those things are immaterial. It's agility as a business value, as a business driver, and also as part of the vision, so that you can enable innovation, true innovation, not just, again, tactical innovation in response, in reaction to topical needs. Well, taking the enforcement database as an example, I think we created a self-contained environment within a self-contained effort, which is associated with open government. We had a task, which is to make our data available to the public. It's a self-contained task that we didn't know exactly in what format and what the public also wanted. So it gave us that freedom not to say, here are all the requirements, and therefore let's go and implement. So we had to tease out the requirements through various interactions, internally as well as externally. And we also couldn't deliver all of those requirements at once, because part of it was, we're just going to seed the idea. Let's free the data first. Let's make that data available to everyone. And then after that, let's see what the public says. And then from there, we can build the next iteration. And then we build the next iteration. And we've done that every 4 or 5 months. We've delivered new features and new capabilities. And I think it worked fairly well. But also one thing we've done is we had a very, very heavy involvement from the deputy secretary, myself, and 4 developers, including the data architect. It's a very small team, and we had daily meetings, and we truly focused on what mattered, not documentation, not various artifacts that were all ancillary, really, to usable software. So what we wanted to deliver was something that the public can use and use as soon as possible. So in a sense, it's a philosophy. It's not as much a specific methodology. Will we follow the same methodology next time we do another project? Not exactly. But the same philosophy will prevail. So heavy involvement, I think, is key. Everybody collaborated. And we were, literally giving feedback every day, and getting feedback from people every day. So that's essential. That feedback loop is essential.